So we've just looked at the fact that humans are soulish creatures, that this wealth of an interior we carry is real, and that gives us an enchantment, a wonder, and nobility on a scale that no other part of the creation order can rival. Now, here I want to talk about what I'm calling minding the world, humans as knowledge seekers, and I want to start here with a quote from the great Blaise Pascal. He said, "Man is but a reed," almost a reference again to our being dust, "the most feeble thing in nature, but he is a thinking reed." Humans are thinking reeds. Now, what does it mean to be thinking reeds? Well, it means we have this awareness of the world that wants to make sense of it. So humans are capable of knowing a huge amount about the world we live in. And that's why we mind the world. We attend to it with our minds in a very special way. And this is completely the opposite of how nature functions. Nature is completely indifferent to us. Nothing in nature is aware that we exist. Nature is unmoved by human existence. If humans went out of existence, if we became extinct, nature couldn't weep because it wouldn't even know that. Unlike us as humans who want to know everything, we have this great awareness. Now, how we mind the world is a wonderful part of God's design. And compared to animals, humans mind the world in what I'm calling multiple horizons. The German philosopher Joseph Piefer, his wonderful book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, he really gets into this. He argues that every biological entity has a world. He said it's the nature of a living thing to have a world, to exist and live in the world, in its worlds. To live means to be in a world. But then Piefer goes on and highlights that the world of a human person is so much bigger than the world that animals inhabit. And that's because humans have this deeper life principle than other biological life forms. So humans have, what we talked about last time, soul, mind, spirit, which is the deeper life principle, what God breathed into us. And it's that which allows us to relate to horizons of the world that go far beyond what our senses can access. So we are sensory like the animals, and yet in minding the world, we could go so far beyond our senses. So Ernest Becker, this wonderful quote, "The mind flies out of its limits in the puny body and soars into a world of timeless beauty, meaning, and justice." Mind flying out of the limits of the sensory, of its embodiment. So the world has so many horizons for humans to mind, to gain knowledge of. And it's the depth of our internal life that allows us to do that. Heschel puts it so wonderfully, we ask for knowledge because the world is too much for us, because the known is crammed with marvel, because the world is replete with what is more than the world as we understand it. So we're drawn out to mind the multiple horizons of our world. Now, as we do that, I think it happens in two levels. There's two different levels of mining that I want briefly to think about. The one is what I'm calling a pre-theoretical minding, bear with me, and the other is a theoretical minding. So first, the pre-theoretical kind of minding. So here, we're addressed by the world with its various dimensions and horizons. So the world is presented to us. We could even say it's presenced to us. It's a real presence. And in this presentation, everything is interwoven. So we receive it as a whole. It's a oneness with multiple horizons going on. So in this first stage of minding, the pre-theoretical, we're not consciously reflecting on what's going on. So let's say you're looking at a sunset. You're not thinking about the sunset. The moment you begin to think about it, your experience breaks down. You're simply letting the wonder of that horizon unfold before you. It's presenced to you. But here's where the second level of minding comes in, what I'm calling the theoretical. Once a world is being presented to us, we can then represent it to our minds for reflection. That means we can think about it. We mind it in a different way. So back to the sunset, you think, that may be the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Or if you're a poet, you get out your journal and you start writing a poem about that sunset. Or if you're a musician, you grab your guitar and you write a song about it. You represent it to your mind for a deeper reflection. Now, when we do that, the kind of minding in the pre-theoretical is already behind us. It's in the past. It's no longer in reality when we become theoretical. We're now in the world of thoughts, imagination, and so forth. So our cognition is really a recognition of what we experienced in the first minding. And now when we do this, our knowing isn't passively received. We're actively engaged in a different way. We're reacting to the experience. We're giving it a higher level of our attention. So what we're doing in the theoretical stage of minding is making clear what was previously just intuited. Okay? Now, there's a lot in this one, I know, but to summarize what we've covered so far, humans have this inner life principle that extends our knowing to include multiple horizons. Simply spectacular. But then in terms of how we mind the world, a world is first presented to us pre-theoretically, prior to reflection, in the real world, we could say. But once that's happened, we have the capacity then to home in and to give some aspect of the world our narrow attention, to make sense of it, to know it in a deeper way. And here's where the thinking read comes in. So our brains, and there's interesting neuroscience that shows this, our brains are designed for this double minding. Now, what we see here is the wonder of what it means to be knowledge seekers. And this fact that we can mine multiple horizons is really a sign of our created glory. It's part of our nobility, part of our enchantment. And there's such negativity today about human knowing. And this is simply trying to reverse that and say it's a wonder, it's a miracle. Now, with all this in the background, I want to think now about three classes of knowledge as we mind the worlds. So the first class of knowledge I'm calling propositional knowledge. And here we return to what I said a moment ago. This is really more in the realm of the theoretical. Propositional knowledge is the kind that we gain with narrow and filtered attention. And the significance of propositional knowledge is that we can lay it out in some kind of a description, a formula, or a sentence. And that allows for clear focus, for the pinpointing of what we know. So the simple sentence, it's raining outside. That's a proposition, that's a description. Mathematical formulas, equations are the same. Now, the value of propositional knowledge is that it allows us to know in the abstract. And abstraction is essential for so many human accomplishments. Without abstraction, we wouldn't put bridges over rivers, and we certainly wouldn't fly planes in the sky. And the value of a proposition is that we can then validate what we're describing as being true. So when anything in the world is pinpointed to a proposition, you can test it. Is this true or is this false? Someone's just told you it's raining outside. You go to the window. It's not raining. That's a false claim. Now, it's because of propositional knowledge that humans can access solid truth about reality, what we traditionally call objective truth. And propositional knowledge allows for as much of the subjective side, our preferences, to be taken out so we can really arrive at what's solidly true. Now, we live in a moment where propositional truth is under attack. I could say much more about that, I won't here, but I think we really need to reaffirm what a wonderful thing propositional truth is. However, we should also be clear that God never intended propositions to be complete knowledge in terms of the horizons that we can mind. If propositions were everything, it would make for a bloodless, lifeless world, a world of dead facts. And if we only lived in propositions, we would go mad. And the great G.K. Chesterton has a wonderful quote that reflects this. He says, "The madman is not the person who's lost his reason. The madman is the man who has lost everything except his reason." And you could argue today that modernity has moved way too far in the realm of abstractions, of facts, live there, and forgotten other kinds of knowledge. So we affirm the place of propositional knowledge, but we say there's more to knowledge than abstractions and theory. So that leads us now to the second class of knowledge, which I call knowledge is wisdom. So when we mind the world in a healthy way, we know our abstractions, our propositions are less than life. I think here's how it works. The ability to theorize means we can step back from the worlds. Wisdom enables us to return to the worlds. So having stood back and reflected well, recognizing, recogniting what we've already seen, on the basis of wisdom, we can make a homecoming and live well in the real worlds. So here's the kind of knowledge that's more than logic. So wisdom, I like to think, here's the appeal of real life and responds to that. So wisdom is the knowing that grants the deeper insight into the real world and its multiple horizons. And I love to think of wisdom as the knowledge of how to live in these multiple horizons that God has created us for. So having minded the world and received its truth, and especially if we've minded with God's word filling our heads, then on the basis of wisdom, we can live out what is true. So wisdom is what we need to act on the world, and to do that in a manner that lines up with God's truth, God's goodness, and God's beauty. Now, there's so much more to be said about wisdom. I thought I'd just read a few verses from Proverbs 2, which reflects just wonderfully how this class of knowledge works. The wisdom writer says, "My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your hearts to understanding, indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart." That's the executive life center where real life happens. "And knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you." Wish we had more time to unpack that beautiful passage. So, first class of knowledge, the propositional. Second, knowledge of wisdom. The third class of knowledge I want to mention is what I'm calling the intersubjective. Humans uniquely have the capacity for what we call interpersonal knowledge, knowing in relationship to other persons, what Martin Buber calls I, thou, or I, you, two persons knowing each other. Now, I said at the beginning of this talk that humans can mind multiple horizons. But here, at this level, we come to the summit in terms of knowing. When we know the horizon of another human person, we are at the top of Everest. Interpersonal knowledge, knowing another creature who's made in God's image. And in this horizon, we enter a dimension of the world which is so full of wonder that all the other horizons fall away. Martin Buber said this in his wonderful line, "The you, the other person, fills the horizon. You can't see anything else when you see the wonder of a human person. Now, intersubjective knowledge is always face to face. Unlike this webinar, I wish I were face to face with you all. Face to face is where true intersubjective knowledge is. And actually, the human face might be the most wonderful horizon in all of creation. Isn't that a beautiful face? The face of an elderly person I know. To look on a human face is to look into the soul. You really look at a face and you get a glimpse of the within. I would say not so much with that face, although it is quite wonderful. You see the soul there. I don't think you see a soul there. Now, by minding the world of a person, their face and their eyes, we really are engaging a horizon that leads the mind to fly out of its limits. We're confronted with the wonder, enchantment of what a human person is. Heschel says, how rarely do we face a person as a person? We are all dominated by the desire to appropriate and to own. Only a free person knows that the true meaning of existence is experienced in giving, in endowing, in meeting a person face to face. Now, as I finish, it's this last class of knowing and minding, the intersubjective, where we discover the most astonishing truth about humans as knowledge seekers. And it's this: there is an interpersonal horizon that is beyond this world and universe, but one that's also personal. And we're speaking here, of course, of the knowledge, the interpersonal knowledge of the true and living God. He has made us to know him intersubjectively. And there's no higher knowing for human persons than this. And that again shows the wonder of a human. We were made to know in the highest class the living and true God.